So now onto the program. You talked a lot about the press, I hope, at lunchtime. I'm now pleased to welcome Jennifer Dorian and Andrew Morse and Leroy Chapman to the stage to talk about a very important topic, what's next at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Many of you may have chatted about the importance of press, how the press has changed, and in particular here in Atlanta, how we get our local press. So we're excited that Jennifer is going to tell us a little bit more about the program, and then an opportunity to ask Andrew Morse and Leroy Chapman to answer some questions as well. So Jennifer?
Thanks. Thank you, John. Good afternoon, everyone. As your programming chair, I've really been looking forward to this focus today on local news. I do not work at the AJC. I work at WABE, as you probably know, and I've gotten to know a lot of the people in the room through a special group called the Georgia News Collaborative. So you can rest assured that the news outlets across this state are working together, collaborating more than ever before for our very existence and to raise our level of service. So today from the AJC, you know we have in the room Kevin Riley, our club member, former editor-in-chief and in transition, as well as we have, reporters from the political beat, Greg Bluestein, Patricia Murphy, Bill Nigett, and we're glad you're here. They are the hosts and researchers and talent for Politically Georgia, the podcast. And if you didn't know, that's going to be a live radio show on WABE starting October 30th. That's the only commercial, I promise. We're actually here to talk about the importance of local news and the investment and the doubling down that the Cox Enterprises is making on the AJC. So let me please share a little bit of background with you about Andrew and Leroy, and we'll get started. So you know Andrew is, since January, the new publisher and president of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, but what you may not know is that he was previously the chief digital officer for CNN Worldwide. And prior to that, he was the digital chief content for Bloomberg News in New York. And he also did stints at ABC Digital and as an executive producer on the weekends for Good Morning, did I get that right? Good Morning America? Yeah. Close enough? And yes, and World News. But I thought it was interesting, he also ran the news bureau in Asia as well as in London. So we'll talk to him. An international news guy is running the AJC. That'll be interesting. And then Leroy Chapman is no stranger to newsprint, to the AJC, to politics. He's been the editor-in-chief of the AJC for the last 6 months. And as you all know, he's the top news executive and the first black editor-in-chief in the newspaper's 155-year history. He's been in he oversees news gathering, programming, features, op-eds, etc. He does it all, whether it's print, video, audio, or newsletters and events. But prior to that, he was the managing editor of the AJC. And Andrew told me that hiring Leroy as the editor-in-chief was a no-brainer. He was very happy with the decision, and they've been working together for the last 6 months. Prior to the AJC, Leroy worked in Columbia, South Carolina, if you're familiar with the state. And he was politics reporter, and he's been covering every presidential election since 2000. So let's get started. All right, well, so you all have worked in a lot of different functions in the news. What is so important and why are you focusing on local news in your career now, Andrew?
Well, I think we have such a unique opportunity here. Hello. All right, I'll project.
That's probably not computer.
No?
Just,
okay.
Yeah.
So, to me, we have such a rich community, and what's so unique about Atlanta that attracted me here in the first place, and that makes this such a great opportunity for the AJC, is our community is so multifaceted. When you look at this city and you look at everything Atlanta has to say for it at the moment, we're the center of the political universe in Atlanta and in Georgia. We have such passion around our sports teams, and what could be more exciting than the Braves? We have a great film and television community. We have a thriving food and culinary community. So there are all of these phenomenal aspects that makes Atlanta so special. And so for me, it's not really a question of international or national or domestic or local. It's the fact, do you have an audience that you can, hang on a sec. Are we having mic issues still or no?
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
Maybe I can just do that microphone was my idea. It's okay, John.
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you, Dan.
In any event, it's a great community, it's a great opportunity, and it's a great city.
It absolutely is. But we read there's a lot of trouble for local news. Have you felt that, Leroy?
You can't be in this business without feeling it. So I got here in the first workday of 2011. One of the reasons I got here, so let me back up first. I'm a native South Carolinian. And so I went to University of South Carolina, worked in news in South Carolina from day one, and did that until 2011. And I kind of thought I would never leave. But, some of the disruption that you felt in the business then, it felt like that, maybe I should make a move. And I got to say that if I had a choice to move anywhere in the country, it'd be here to do news. For a couple of reasons. One, this is a great place to raise a family. So when I got here, my children were 12, 11, and 8. So they were at an age where they kind of had some friends, but we could move and it wouldn't be terribly disruptive, and so we did. And fantastic choice. So I get here, and I'm a Southerner. I mean, I don't think I can fool anybody into thinking that I'm not, because all you have to do is hear me talk. But as a Southerner, being here in Atlanta was important too. So made the move here. The disruption part, well, yes, it has been. But I'll say this about the AJC is that we have been present and up to the task for every big story since I've been here. Did we need more hands? Could we have used more hands? Well, of course. Has our business been disrupted by what it means to print a daily newspaper? What it means when you had an advertising model that paid for all of your journalism and it doesn't any longer in that way? Well, yeah, that's something that all of my peer group deals with too. So now that I'm here, and I've been in this business now for nearly 30 years, so I'm 52 years old, and I'm feeling it a little bit too. It's not like a young 52. This business makes you like an old 52 to some degree. And it's funny too, I told Andrew, I said, this is the first time I've ever been older than my boss. But I say that to say this though, that in this business that's been as disrupted as it has been, I think that what journalists have had to do is be resourceful. We've had to meet different expectations, to be present in ways that we hadn't been before, if you're a newspaper journalist, Andrew has spent his years in broadcast. They were always breaking news 24/7. To us, we had to adopt that, but that was the gift of the internet, which was to be able to put us in the 24-hour news cycle. But all in all, I'll just say this about the disruption with local news is we don't have as many hands, but I think operating in the cycle of being very judicious in what you've been given means that we do a pretty good job of prioritizing now. The most important stuff, we're there. And those conversations have to happen all the time about what's the most important thing. And look, I could use a newsroom that's bigger, and I think we're going to get there. But even though I think with our business, we've not had as many hands, and we've seen places that don't have news in the capacity that they had, I think journalists themselves have been more resourceful and have been adaptive to all the technology and the ways that people want to receive their news.
Hear, hear. So the two things, no matter where you work in the news business, you're thinking about transformation and sustainability. And it's just so much new behaviors by all of us of how we get our news. So Andrew, I think you were interviewed in the Wall Street Journal recently talking about the very thing of how do you transform, how do you sustain? Tell us your vision.
So it does get back to the question you just asked, and I would say it's not just local news that's being disrupted, it's all news. It's international news organizations, national news organizations, local, and whether it's print or whether it's broadcast, every organization's being disrupted. The reason why it's twofold. One, the way in which consumers are consuming news and information, as we know, is fundamentally changed. I don't need to say that to each of you because it's happening every day, whether you're waking up in the morning and reading newsletters or listening to podcasts or going online. I hope all of you still receive the AJC at your doorstep. And by the way, you're going to continue to do that for some time. But in addition to that, consumers are consuming news differently. Technology has become frankly, a gift to journalism. And it's not new, by the way, that journalism has been disrupted by technology. And I won't take you down too long of a historical path, but there's a point in history where cave drawings were the best example form of technology. You skip ahead a couple centuries, a couple millennium, and it's no longer cave drawings, but Gutenberg invents the printing press in 1466, and it's an amazing technical disruption that allowed journalism to be disseminated around the world. Skip ahead further, and Samuel F.B. Morse, no relation, by the way, sends the first message. And what he does, by the way, when he sends that first telegraph message, Morse said, "What hath God wrought?" And so everybody thought, what does this mean now that you can beam journalism or news or information all around the world? And then comes radio, and then comes television. And then when CNN launches in 1980, then comes live television. And so the internet, and then mobile, and then social media are only the latest steps on this journey. So to bring it back to the question that you asked, we can't stand still. We have to acknowledge that audiences want something different from us. The disruption of local journalism, it's happened for a few reasons, and I think to some degree, we have to look at ourselves as well. If we stop fulfilling such a critical need to customers, meaning, are we providing value in people's lives? Whether it's a small community or a large community, we have to look at ourselves and make sure that we're providing value, no matter how big or small your newsroom is. And I think to some degree, while we've been beset by these external forces, whether it's pressures on the advertising industry, whether it's changing consumer behavior, the reality is, I think, newsrooms in pursuit of short-term revenue sometimes, newsrooms in pursuit of clicks, newsrooms in pursuit of traffic or circulation or ratings, lost sight a little bit of who they serve, and we're here to serve you in the community. And so the story that ran recently in the Wall Street Journal reflected our ambition, which is to transform the AJC from a storied 155-year-old daily newspaper into a modern media company. And in order to do that, or as we do that, our mission that we've set is very clear. Our mission is to be the most essential and engaging source of news for the people of Atlanta, of Georgia, and the South. And that's our mission. And we want to partner with everybody in this room to do that. And we want to make sure that we're filling that critical need with the community. So it's a long answer, but I think to understand the disruption that we're living in today, you kind of need to go back to cave drawings and Gutenberg.
Well, you covered disruption, but now let's hear a little bit about sustainability. What kind of runway does a local newspaper have? I'm just grateful we have a local newspaper. There are many communities, 25% of newspapers have shuttered in the last 20 years. So tell us about sustainability.
Yeah, and again, it's sort of, I look at those statistics and you read about these news deserts and it gets terrifying. But what I do is I look at the New York Times, and over the course of the last 10 to 12 years, the New York Times has built a blueprint and executed on it for any news organization in the world, frankly, that cares to follow it. And it doesn't matter that the New York Times is big and global and they're from New York. That's not really the point. What they've done is fundamentally transform their business model and the relationship that they have with customers, and that's led to sustainability. So what the Times did was they created one North Star, and that was growing their number of digital subscriptions. And the reason why they did it is because when you're growing a digital subscription, it means you're having people connect with you. You're providing value to them, and they're giving you their credit card, or they're giving you a hard-earned dollar. And so in making that pivot and investing pretty heavily in product development, technology, and analytics alongside world-class journalism, the Times set a goal and said we want to reach 10 million digital subscribers, and they put that on a board, and they've been working relentlessly. And so every quarter when the New York Times reports earnings now, they're treated like a tech company because they continue to grow subscribers and they continue to deliver value. And that's why they've gone out and they've made some pretty interesting acquisitions as well to continue to grow their business. So for us, it's really the same formula. I have my first day at work, I drew a dartboard on a whiteboard in my office. And at the center of that dartboard is Atlanta, and the next ring out is Georgia, and the next ring out is the South, and the next ring out is the nation. And the Times, the Journal, last week reported something which is true. We believe that we can build a business that attracts 500,000 paying subscribers by the end of 2026. And if we do that, the AJC will be in a position that no other local news organization has been able to achieve. And we didn't make up that number. We didn't just play pin the tail on the donkey with my dartboard, we really looked at the market. We looked at who we're currently reaching in Atlanta and who we'd like to reach. We're looking at how influential Atlanta is. We're looking at parts of the state that, frankly, we haven't reached in quite a long time. And we believe we have this storied brand in this great city. And so if we can deliver those 500,000 subscribers, we've got a very, very sustainable, powerful, growing business.
Godspeed. 500,000 by 2026. Okay.
Yep.
And what about those of us in the room, not that, we would be the crowd that wants the newspaper at the end of our driveway. What about my daily ritual?
You're still getting it. So look, I know there had been some reports in the last couple of years that we were thinking about dialing back on the print edition and just printing Sundays. Those were true. There were conversations about that. And what we realized really at the beginning of the year this year were a couple things. One, our digital product isn't ready. And so if we had rushed to stop delivering the daily print edition before we had really built that trust with our customers, that we could continue to provide that essential and engaging role in their lives, it would have been really damaging for the AJC, and frankly, it would have been really damaging for the community. So that was one, and we came in and we just said, look, we need to hit pause. And we thought maybe we'd pause a few months. And then what happened was, and Leroy gets this every day, I just started meeting people in town, a lot of you in this room, and people tell me how much they really love that paper. And whether it's seeing what's on the front page, or whether it's looking at the sports scores, or whether it's reading the comics with their kids on the weekends, there is still value in that printed edition. So we've committed to printing the paper at least through next year while we build our digital product, and I think it still has a lot of value.
That's some good news for a lot of us. Leroy, let's talk about your newsroom.
Yes.
How large is the newsroom staff? First, quick question.
So I think we're now at 168 or so. It depends on, listen, it's a floating, but thereabouts.
That's huge, 168.
Yes.
And I was curious, what's it like being a journalist in the year 2023? Do you specialize in one platform or medium, or do you have to make a story for everything?
So we have to think about the customer in a way, as Andrew said, that we probably hadn't. So the guys who've had this job, who have streets named after them, sort of didn't have to think about this
Like Kevin Riley Way?
They didn't have to think about this continual feedback loop we get now, and we get that. So in thinking about how we deliver for Atlanta, having a newsroom that is dynamic as it is right now is fantastic. But we have plenty to do in terms of being able to reach everyone that we need to reach. So being a journalist now, we have a couple in this room. I mean, Greg Bluestein's one of them. Greg Bluestein is a guy who's very comfortable on video. If you're not listening to the Politically Georgia podcast, then you might not be real serious about politics. But if you are, you listen. So you have to be very good with audio. And then he writes. So you will see his byline in our newspaper just about every single day. Well, journalists have to be that. We have to have our feet planted next to what we're covering. So we're in this era now of news where there's a lot of commodity. The advantage we've got in Atlanta is that we are here. And we're here in a place where it's the epicenter of politics. It is the place where I think the nation's decision on what's going to happen next with the executive branch and whether or not our former president winds up being a viable candidate might get decided in large part here, either through the ballot box or the court system or some combination of both. But Georgia is indispensable in what happens with that. In terms of culture, it's here. So you think about the entertainment industry and film and just black culture. And I am certainly a testament to what has built Atlanta. I'm a black Southerner who came to Atlanta to succeed. Well, if you look at our suburbs, look at our city, that's really what's built them in that way. And so I can go on and on too about the kind of city we've become, and also my peer group. Well, I've got a peer group of ladies and gentlemen who have a similar job in other cities, and they also point to our advantage. And we do have some advantage to grow beyond just being local. And when Andrew talks about going out in the state and even beyond, well, there are lines of things and there are stories about America that are told through Georgia that is of interest to our country and beyond.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're covering different genres and also audiences. Is that how you think about it?
Yeah, think about it this way. So the audience for news is pretty segmented too. So all of us are familiar with what happened between that time where before cable television, when TV was about the family gathering around the box to watch what was on. Then you wound up having cartoons on for your kids, and you had news on for the adults, and then you had everything in between. And so news is beginning to be a little bit like that too. But I think one of the advantages too about what has been seen as a disruption with digital and with social media is that we can create deeper relationships with segments of our audience. For us, it's a lot. It's certainly by age, by race, and by topic interest, and by geography. So if you think about all those things, we can make deeper connections with those segmented audiences because there are things that they care pretty deeply about that we can deliver.
That makes perfect sense. So the technology allows you to be more personalized or targeted, and you can follow what you care about.
Mm-hmm.
That makes me want to ask you about Axios. Is that still part of your portfolio, Andrew?
So it's a part of the Cox family portfolio. So about a year ago, Cox acquired Axios, and it's, for those of you who don't know Axios, it is a huge success story in digital media. It's one of the most impactful and I think insightful sources of just nonpartisan, straight up news, and they've done such a great job. And Cox was interested in Axios also because of their commitment in particular to local news. And I coincidentally knew the founders of Axios quite well, and we've worked together various times over the years. And so as I was considering whether to come to the AJC, the notion of being under the same tent and the same umbrella as the Axios team was a huge selling point for me.
Fabulous. Okay, I had an interesting audience participation question. Was anybody here a paper boy or paper girl? Which I never heard of. Ooh, that's a bunch.
Wow.
Okay, that's fun to know. So I was thinking about that, and Leroy, what's a way people get into the news business or even aware or interested as a young person, and then what's the pipeline like?
So it's changed, but you can still get into this business. I am going to the University of South Carolina next month to talk a little bit about this.
Okay.
But the thing that is important is that we've got an education pipeline that is going to be one thing, but that's not the sole way. Lots of it is incumbent upon news organizations being able to do something the AJC is blessed to do. We have internships, and we have internship classes that are seasonal. We just invited our fall class in. Our fall class is exclusively local.
Oh, nice.
So I think we have 6 interns for fall. We have more than double that amount during the summer, and it's a national program. So it's that kind of exposure that's important to get in, but I think the formal education part of that has to comport with what's happening today. No disrespect to long tenured professors, but someone who was in a newsroom 30 years ago probably does not have the same hands-on experience of what it means to be a journalist today. And so that's what I'm talking to my friends at the University of South Carolina about in a month.
So practical, real in the newsroom, and then do you pay your interns?
We do.
That's awesome.
Well, yeah, that's the important thing. Don't live out. I mean, you've got to pay. And that's an equity thing, too.
That is.
One of the things about journalists, I sit here, and it's the history of me sitting in a seat like this, not lost, but our industry has a diversity problem. Well, one of the things that you can do with internships that can make them equitable is pay, because the folks who are least able to take an unpaid internship is typically men and women of color.
So Andrew, you have been involved in a lot of innovation. What is it like leading a team through change?
It's fun. I tend to gravitate towards challenges that are a little bit trickier, but I think there's actually nothing more gratifying than working with a team of incredibly committed people in terms of a really worthy mission. And for us, I keep saying to people, I haven't had this much fun at work in a long time. And I've said that to Greg and Patricia and Bill, and I've said it to Leroy. Change is really hard, but what we have is, we have this really storied institution. We're fortunate to work in a city like Atlanta, where I really do feel that the city is rooting for us. We have a company in Cox that cares deeply about local news, the importance of local news, and cares deeply about the AJC, and has given us a tremendous amount of running room and investment and support. So you really have all the qualities that you would want. So then our job is easy to some degree. You set a North Star and you set a goal and you let the team know the hill that you're taking, and then it's a lot of fun to get there together. So we've got a really good head of steam, I think, at the AJC, and as you noted, and as Leroy noted, there have been years, frankly, and I've heard this from a lot of people in this room, where under financial pressures and under the strain of disruption, I don't know that the AJC has always been there in the same way that we once were for all of you. The bedrock of our editorial foundation always was, and the work of our newsroom was never in question. The work that Leroy did, that Kevin Riley has done, that Greg and Patricia have done over the years is truly extraordinary under some pretty difficult circumstances. We're now in a place, though, where I think having a bold plan, a bold ambition, that great tradition, we feel really, really well set up for success.
Same question, Leroy, because I know it's going to feel different in a newsroom. No shade on newsrooms, but change, like now you have to, hey, you got to file that story 3 ways now.
Yeah. So the sort of change that I think newsrooms have had to embrace, Andrew's right, some of it came out of just necessity, right? So it's not a position of power when you're managing scarcity. And that's what we did for a long time. We were managing scarcity. But one of the things that we've been, though, is that we have been pockets of innovation have crept up in our business that have become some of the solutions. Andrew referenced what the New York Times found out. And here's the thing, too, I think that's pretty important, is that while newspaper and we love newsprint and all of that, we, like every other business, had to embrace technology. And so in doing that, we can now listen to our customers in ways that we couldn't. And that, I think, is a pretty powerful way to make sure that you're delivering exactly what a community needs, is to just be able to listen to it. So some of the things are technology, but some of the things are also just what technology brings you and the advantages of it. So we can listen better than we used to, number one. So that's something that reporters do now that, when I started as a reporter, you had to call me. I got an email address, I think, in my second reporting job. So that shows you exactly how recent this is. So I did not have the same way to have constant communication. Now, everyone's accessible, and people tend to find me on Twitter all the time. God bless them, but they do. So that's the difference. I mean, that's sort of, and again, I have people in our newsroom, and we ask them to embed and have their feet on the ground in our communities. And so not only being there, but being able to tell people we're there, being able to have those people communicate in that community in a way that's efficient and quick is invaluable to what we do every day.
So there's a microphone right there if anybody would like to ask a question. Oh, please, right off the bat.
I used to take my news with print, but now I spend a little more time in the car. I've gone to Audible. Maybe we get Dr. King to pray for us on the traffic here, and we can start going back to print. But first, a compliment. I listen to Politically Georgia every day, and Patricia and Greg and your newest edition, Bill, are fantastic. So thank you for that. Thank you all.
Hey, thank you.
And secondly, the other subscription I have besides the AJC is the New York Times, and they have New York Times Audible where I can listen to news stories while I travel. Have y'all thought about that?
We have. We're going to be expanding our audio and our video capabilities pretty extensively over the course of the next few months. And whether it's being able to have your articles read to you, whether it's increasing our podcast lineup, we're also looking into potentially doing hourly updates at some point. And again, the notion of television and radio and print is almost a little antiquated. When we look at ourselves as a modern media company, we need to be there in all formats. So stay tuned in your car.
You sort of answered my question, but let me reframe it. Why has the digital AJC been so bad?
That was the delicate version.
You said it's not ready, and that is putting it. I'm trying to be polite. I'm not succeeding, but it's been painful as someone who is a journalist who gets the paper, gets 2 papers daily, subscribe to a couple of others digitally. It's been painful to try to interact with the AJC digitally, and give me some hope. Don't tell me, look for the future. What's the plan, and when, and when will it happen, and spill.
Got it. So look, digital's complicated. Thanks, by the way, for the candor, and it's important. Like, we want to hear from people, and we need you to be candid with us. It's a priority and resource, to be honest. A lot of newsrooms, most newsrooms, to be honest, have underinvested in product development, technology, analytics, and modern growth marketing, which are just essentials to running a modern business. The AJC doesn't have a journalism problem. The AJC has a technology and platform problem. And so that's one of the first things that we really started focusing on the beginning of the year, this year, was we didn't have a chief product officer. We now have a chief product officer and somebody whose responsibility is product development, technology, and analytics. We're in the process of hiring a growth marketing lead, and that person is going to be in charge of building what we call full funnel acquisition and retention capability, which means that, as Leroy said, we have different relationships with customers. We need to be able to go out and seek new customers, and once you're with us, we need to talk to you. We need to know what you want. It's not an accident that when you're reading something in the New York Times, it knows the 5 other things that you might be interested in reading or watching. The kind of technology that is powering Amazon and Netflix and Google, that's what the Times has invested in. And in addition to all of their journalism successes, that's been the real secret to their success. So short answer is it's going to take a little while, but you're going to see different iterations throughout Q4. You're going to see enhancements to the product experience. And as we get into the end of this year, the beginning of next year, you'll see a new app and you'll begin to see product enhancements. But it takes time.
So, by the way, I enjoy the digital edition, but
Good.
so if a reporter uses ChatGPT to finish or start a story, have they violated your professional standards? And then the second question to you, Leroy, you mentioned segmenting the audience.
Yes.
When I was growing up, a big part of what the local newspaper did was help build community. And so we shared the same news stories, we shared the same source of information and so forth. By segmenting the audience to a hyper level, does it actually help exacerbate the polarization that occurs within our communities?
That's a good question. You want me? I can answer that one, then we can answer the second one. Well, it's a good question too about segmenting of audiences, but I think we got to be clear about this. There was one time when you just had television or just a newspaper, and essentially that newspaper that had sections in it also did the same thing to some degree, right? If you wanted national news, you read here. If you wanted local here, we all got it, but it didn't mean we all consumed it. And I'm a testament to that because I picked up my newspaper habit from my great-grandmother. She would open it up and read all the hard news. I would read the comics and the sports. Not only did I read the sports, I would go to the very local section of the Greenville Piedmont to see if my name got in the newspaper because they covered Little League, baseball, and football. So it got down to that. So we've always been a little bit segmented in some way. But here's the thing I think that would actually help with exactly what you talk about. Social media does a phenomenal job of disrupting us and dividing us, right? So that is part of what happens when you've got an algorithm and you've got profit from clicks and the business of outrage can raise money. That happens. I think what we will do, though, is we will be the kind of counter-programming to that. Well, we're telling you what's happening at your doorstep and outside your door. That's pretty important because that's important for what you pay for your home, for who's on the ballot and who will represent you at all levels of government. Those things are still fundamental. So while we tell you that very local story, we'll also tell that story broadly too. So if we can tell you about how to live and navigate in Atlanta, if we can tell you about who your leaders are and what decisions that they're making, if we do that on all levels, we're still telling a big, broad, important story to everyone, and we will expose it. Now, underneath that, will there be a couple of places where we will be reaching parents with children in schools? That's a segmented audience, of course, because they have things that I think people who are retirees or people like me, an aspiring empty nester, don't have. So we will be able to target you in ways I think that's pretty important, but also still tell the big stories.
And I would add to that, though, when we talk about audience segmentation in digital, even with another layer as well. So for us, when we talk about 500,000 subscribers, people have different interests. So when it comes to our news, and Leroy gave a lot of those news examples, I do think that we want one big tent, and our news coverage is going to be of value to people all over the city, rich or poor, white or black, young or old. But what we've also done is we've identified these different affinities among our users. So we know we have a hardcore segment of political junkies, people who love Greg and Patricia and Bill, and who want to know what's going on in Georgia politics. And so we're able now to reach that audience, to build products for that audience, to create content for that audience. There's another segment. We have passionate sports fans around the Atlanta Braves, the Georgia Bulldogs, the Atlanta Hawks. I think there's some Falcons fans. They had a great win, and they're off to a great start. So that's another segment. Now there's some crossover, and we've deduped in our model, but there's crossover. There's an incredibly passionate audience around food in Atlanta, and we want to be able to serve them and build a product for them. And Atlanta is home to the most dynamic African-American community in the country. That's another audience segment. So what Leroy was getting at before is we can build products, and we can build marketing plans, and we can create content that serves each of those audiences, and that's part of our plan. Back just very quickly, and then I know we've got other questions on the GPT front. It's a really important technology. We can't bury our heads in the sand, but you're not going to see ChatGPT writing stories on the front page of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution.
So we're in the lightning round now. We got 1.5 minutes. So RK, you asked your question. We got one other question behind it. Go ahead, RK, you're on.
It's a very short question to you, Leroy, to your boss. My question is, you said you're going to be about 500,000 people. How many subscribers you have now?
We have about 120,000 split about evenly between digital and print.
Okay, good job. Leroy, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Thank you. Leroy, what do you do for fun?
Wow, that's a really good question. I just got off vacation, so this is embarrassing. So I go out, I'm with my wife, and then on Saturday, we actually got up and did something that's a lot like journalism. We went to an exhibit that was great. The Miami Herald did a great thing about a cemetery, and they did some fantastic reporting, and they had these great pictures that got curated for this art museum, and it was great. That was fun to me. So it was kind of journalism, but it was still fun, right?
I'm glad after 6 months on the job, you still like Kevin Riley?
So Kevin has been an invaluable resource to me, and I think our relationship is much better now because he doesn't tell me to do anything. It's sort of reverse, so.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, RK. Tracy, yes, from the Georgia News Collaborative.
Yes, quick and easy question, Andrew. Will the Atlanta Journal-Constitution move back to the city of Atlanta, and if so, when?
Yes, next year. I can't give you the exact address, but I will tell you that we will be in the heart of Midtown. It's really important to us. We've been... Thank you. We've been on the Cox campus, for those of you who don't know, in Dunwoody for some time now. We were downtown, obviously, for a very long time. We need to be in the heart of this city. If we're going to be there to tell the stories of the city, and if we want to really wrap ourselves in this city the way we want to, we need to be there, we need to be visible. So you'll see an AJC building with AJC signage in the center of town. We hope that you all will come in. We want it to be a place where we have a big, bustling, thriving newsroom, where newsmakers come in, where we sit down and do interviews. So stay tuned, but we will be in a new building in Midtown in 2024.
Great news.
Very exciting.
Jennifer, Leroy, Andrew, let's give them a big hand, please. Next week's program, September 25th at Bastian CEO of Delta Airlines. Please join us. See you then. Have a great week.